The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet hospital corridors as William stood at the window, watching the world wake up below. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the cold metal frame, trying to steady himself for what lay ahead. Behind him, Kate lay peacefully in the hospital bed, her breathing shallow but steady. The doctors had given them the news 3 days ago, but somehow it still felt like a cruel dream from which he might wake up. Kate had always been the stronger one between them. Even now, facing the unthinkable, she maintained that gentle smile that had first captured his heart 25 years ago. They had met at a small coffee shop near the university, where she worked part-time while studying to become a teacher. William had been a struggling artist then, spending his days painting portraits in the park and his evenings waiting tables to make ends meet. He remembered that first conversation like it was yesterday. Kate had spilled coffee on his sketchbook, and instead of being angry, he found himself laughing at her flustered apologies. She had insisted on buying him a new one, even though her paycheck barely covered her own expenses. That act of kindness, that willingness to sacrifice for a stranger, had shown him the kind of person she truly was. Their love story had unfolded slowly, like a beautiful painting taking shape one brushstroke at a time. They spent countless evenings walking through the city, talking about their dreams and fears. Kate wanted to change the world one child at a time through education. William dreamed of creating art that would touch people's souls. They supported each other through late-night study sessions and early morning shifts, sharing cheap meals and expensive dreams. The proposal had been simple but perfect. William had taken Kate back to that same coffee shop where they first met. He had painted a small watercolor of the moment they had first locked eyes, and hidden the ring inside the frame. When she opened it, tears had streamed down her face before she even saw the diamond. She said yes before he could even ask the question properly. Their wedding had been modest but filled with love. Kate wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit her perfectly. William had painted their wedding invitations by hand, each one a small work of art. They couldn't afford a fancy venue, so they held the ceremony in the community center, where Kate taught art classes to underprivileged children. Every person in that room was there because they truly mattered to the couple, not out of obligation or social expectation. The early years of marriage had brought their share of challenges. William's art career was slow to take off, and Kate's teaching salary barely covered their tiny apartment's rent. They ate pasta more nights than they cared to count and wore the same clothes until they fell apart. But they had each other, and somehow that made every struggle feel manageable. Kate had a way of finding joy in the smallest things. She would surprise William with picnics made from leftover sandwiches in their apartment's cramped living room. She collected smooth stones from the beach and painted them with inspirational messages, leaving them around their home like tiny treasures. When William felt discouraged about his art, she would sit with him for hours, helping him see the beauty in his work that he couldn't see himself. Their first big break had come when Kate convinced William to enter a local art competition. He had been reluctant, convinced his work wasn't good enough. But Kate had secretly submitted one of his paintings, a portrait of her reading by the window that captured the golden afternoon light perfectly. When he won second place and a small cash prize, they had celebrated by buying their first real piece of furniture together, a second-hand dining table where they would share thousands of meals over the years. Children had come later, after they had finally achieved some financial stability. First Emma, then Michael, and finally little Sarah. Kate had been a natural mother, patient and nurturing, while William discovered a tenderness in himself he never knew existed. He painted portraits of each child at different stages of their lives, creating a visual diary of their family's growth. The house they eventually bought was nothing fancy, but Kate had transformed it into a warm, welcoming home. She had a gift for making any space feel special. She painted murals on the children's bedroom walls, planted flowers in every available corner of their small garden, and filled their home with the laughter and love that made it truly theirs. William's art career had gradually gained momentum over the years. His paintings began selling at local galleries, then regional ones, and eventually, he had his first solo exhibition in the city. Kate had been so proud that night, standing beside him in her best dress, which she had owned for years but somehow made look new with her radiant smile. But success had never changed Kate. She continued teaching, continued volunteering at the community center, continued being the heart of their family and their community. She remembered everyone's birthdays, organized neighborhood potluck dinners, and somehow always knew exactly what to say when someone was struggling. The diagnosis had come out of nowhere, like a lightning strike on a clear day. Kate had been feeling tired, but they had attributed it to her busy schedule. When the fatigue didn't improve, she had finally agreed to see a doctor. The tests, the waiting, the devastating news. It had all happened so quickly that William's mind still couldn't fully process it. Now, standing in this sterile hospital room, William felt the weight of all their shared memories pressing down on him. 25 years of love, laughter, struggles, and triumphs. 25 years of building a life together, only to face the possibility of continuing it alone. Kate stirred in the bed behind him, and William quickly wiped his eyes before turning around. Her eyes opened slowly, and when she saw him, that familiar smile spread across her face, though it was weaker now than it used to be. "Good morning, my love," she whispered, her voice hoarse but still carrying the warmth that had comforted him through countless mornings. "Have you been standing there long?" William moved to her bedside, taking her hand in his. It felt so small and fragile now. Nothing like the strong hands that had held his through every challenge they had faced together. "Just watching the sunrise," William replied softly, settling into the chair beside her bed. "You know how much I love the way the light changes in the morning." It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. He had been awake most of the night, unable to sleep while listening to her labored breathing, afraid that each breath might be her last. Kate squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "I remember when you used to wake up early to paint the sunrise from our bedroom window. You said the light was different every single day, that no two mornings were ever exactly the same." Her eyes sparkled with the memory, and for a moment, William could see the young woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. The doctor had explained that Kate's condition was progressing faster than they had initially hoped. The treatment options were limited, and the side effects would likely diminish what quality of life she had remaining. Kate had listened to everything with that calm composure that had always amazed William. Even facing her own mortality, she was more concerned about how everyone else was coping. Their children had been taking turns visiting, each struggling in their own way to process what was happening. Emma, now 22 and fresh out of college, tried to stay strong for everyone else but often broke down in the hospital bathroom. Michael, 18 and about to start his senior year of high school, had become quiet and withdrawn, spending hours sitting beside his mother's bed without saying much. Little Sarah, only 14, still couldn't quite grasp why her vibrant, energetic mother was suddenly so weak and tired all the time. Kate worried most about Sarah. "She's still so young," Kate had confided to William the previous evening. "I won't be there to help her through high school, to teach her about boys, to help her get ready for prom. I won't see her graduate or go to college or get married." The tears had come then, the first time William had seen her truly break down since the diagnosis. But this morning, Kate seemed more at peace. She had asked William to bring her sketchbook, the one she used for her art classes. Her hands shook as she tried to draw, but she was determined to finish something. "I want to leave them each a drawing," she explained. "Something they can keep, something made just for them." William watched as she struggled to control the pencil, her once steady artist's hands now betraying her. Without a word, he gently placed his hand over hers, helping to guide the pencil across the paper. Together they drew a portrait of Emma, capturing her bright smile and the determined set of her shoulders that reminded William so much of Kate. "Tell me about your plans for the gallery showing next month," Kate said as they worked together. William's upcoming exhibition was a retrospective of his work over the past 25 years, including many paintings of Kate and their family. The gallery owner had called it a love story in paint, and William had been excited about it until Kate's diagnosis made everything else seem unimportant. "I don't think I can do it," William admitted. "Not without you there. You've been to every single opening, every show. How can I celebrate my art when you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Kate stopped drawing and looked at him with those beautiful green eyes that had held his gaze across a crowded coffee shop all those years ago. "You have to do it," she said firmly. "Your art is part of your legacy, part of what you'll leave behind. But more than that, your art is part of our story. Every painting you've ever created has been touched by our love, by our life together." She was right, of course. His most celebrated pieces were the ones inspired by their family, by quiet moments at home, by the way afternoon light fell across Kate's face as she graded papers at their kitchen table. His art wasn't just his own. It was a testament to their partnership, their shared journey through life. A nurse came in to check Kate's vital signs, interrupting their conversation. The woman was kind and gentle, treating Kate with the dignity and respect she deserved. William had noticed how all the staff seemed drawn to Kate, despite her weakened condition. She still had that gift for making everyone around her feel valued and heard. After the nurse left, Kate returned to her drawing. This time she was sketching Michael, trying to capture the way he looked when he was deep in thought. "He's going to be okay," she said quietly. "He's stronger than he thinks he is. But he's going to need you to believe in him, especially when he doesn't believe in himself." William nodded, though the thought of raising their children alone terrified him. Kate had always been the heart of their family, the one who remembered everything, who kept them all connected and grounded. How could he possibly fill that role? "I've been writing letters," Kate continued, not looking up from her drawing. "One for each of them to open on their wedding days and others for birthdays, graduations, all the big moments I'll miss. I want them to know how proud I am of them, how much I believe in them." The thought of Kate spending her precious remaining energy writing letters for events she would never see was almost too much for William to bear, but he also recognized it as quintessentially Kate, always thinking of others, always trying to give them what they needed even when she had so little left to give. "What about me?" William asked quietly. "Did you write me a letter too?" Kate smiled and reached for his face with her free hand, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "I don't need to write you a letter," she said. "Everything I want to say to you is already written in the life we've built together. It's in every painting you've created, every moment we've shared, every time you've made me laugh when I wanted to cry." She paused, looking directly into his eyes. "But I need you to promise me something. After I'm gone, I need you to keep living. Really living, not just going through the motions. Paint, laugh, love again if that's what makes you happy. Don't let my death be the end of your story." The idea of loving anyone else seemed impossible to William, but he understood what Kate was trying to tell him. She wanted him to remain open to joy, to not let grief consume the rest of his life. It was such a Kate thing to say, even now thinking about his happiness above her own fear. The afternoon brought visitors from their small community. Word had spread about Kate's condition, and people kept arriving with flowers, homemade meals, and heartfelt messages. William was touched by the outpouring of love, though he could see it was exhausting Kate to receive so many well-wishers. Mrs. Henderson from next door came by with a casserole and tears in her eyes. "Kate helped my grandson with his reading every Tuesday after school for 2 years, she told William. "Never asked for anything in return. That boy can read chapter books now because of your wife." William watched Kate's face light up at the news, even in her weakened state. Tom, the owner of the coffee shop where they had first met, arrived with a thermos of Kate's favorite lavender tea. "On the house," he said gruffly, though William could see the emotion in the older man's eyes. Tom had watched their love story unfold from the very beginning, had given them free coffee during their lean college years, and had celebrated every milestone with them. But perhaps the most touching visit came from Maria, one of Kate's former students who was now a teacher herself. She brought a thick folder filled with letters from students Kate had taught over the years, children who were now adults with families of their own. "When I told them about Mrs. Kate," Maria explained, her voice thick with emotion, "they all wanted to write to her. Some of these kids are in their 30s now, and they still remember how she made them feel special." Kate spent an hour reading through the letters, tears streaming down her face. One letter was from a boy named James who had struggled with severe dyslexia. Kate had spent countless lunch hours working with him, finding creative ways to help him understand reading. He was now a successful engineer with 2 children of his own. "You taught me that being different wasn't being broken," he had written. "You saved my life in ways you'll never know." Another letter came from a girl named Sophie who had been bullied for being overweight. Kate had not only protected her in class, but had also started an art club, where Sophie discovered her talent for sculpture. Sophie was now a professional artist with her own gallery. "You showed me that beauty comes in all forms," she wrote. "Every piece I create carries a little bit of the confidence you gave me," William realized. As he listened to Kate read these letters, that his wife had touched hundreds of lives in ways he had never fully understood. While he had been focused on creating art for galleries and critics, Kate had been creating something far more valuable. She had been shaping human beings, giving them tools and confidence and love that would last their entire lives. "I never knew," William whispered to Kate during a quiet moment between visitors. "I never realized how many people you've helped over the years." Kate smiled weakly. "That's the thing about teaching," she said. "You plant seeds and trust that they'll grow, even if you never get to see the full garden. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get letters like these that show you the flowers are blooming." Dr. Martinez arrived for Kate's evening checkup, and William could see from her expression that the news wasn't good. Kate's vitals had weakened significantly since morning, and her breathing was becoming more labored. The doctor spoke quietly with William in the hallway, explaining that they were likely looking at days rather than weeks now. When William returned to the room, Kate was looking out the window at the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and pinks, the kind of natural masterpiece that had inspired William's art for decades. "It's beautiful," Kate murmured. "I always loved sunsets more than sunrises. There's something hopeful about the way the day ends, like a promise that tomorrow will bring something new." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors shift and deepen as the sun sank lower. William held Kate's hand, memorizing the feeling of her fingers intertwined with his. How many sunsets had they watched together over the years? Hundreds, thousands? Each one had been a small gift, though they hadn't always recognized it at the time. "Do you remember our first sunset together?" Kate asked suddenly. William smiled at the memory. They had been dating for about a month, and Kate had insisted they climb to the roof of her apartment building to watch the sun go down. She had brought a thermos of hot chocolate and a blanket that smelled like her lavender soap. "You said sunsets were better than movies because they were free and they were real," William recalled. "And I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, sitting there with the light in your hair." "I knew that night," Kate said softly. "I knew I was going to love you for the rest of my life. I just never imagined the rest of my life would be so much shorter than I hoped." William felt his chest tighten with emotion, but he forced himself to stay strong for her. "The length doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is how deep it goes, how completely we've loved each other. Some people live to be 90 and never experience what we've had." Kate turned to look at him, and he could see both sadness and gratitude in her eyes. "Promise me you'll paint this sunset," she said. "Promise me you'll remember this moment, this feeling of loving someone so completely that your heart feels like it might burst." "I promise," William said, and he meant it. He would paint this sunset, and every sunset for the rest of his life, because each one would remind him of this moment, of Kate's hand in his, of the privilege of being loved by someone so extraordinary. The children arrived for dinner, bringing takeout from the Chinese restaurant where they used to celebrate special occasions as a family. They spread the containers out on the small table in Kate's room, and for a few hours they almost felt like a normal family again. Kate managed to eat a few bites, and she laughed at Michael's impression of his chemistry teacher. Emma showed Kate her latest college photos, and Sarah talked excitedly about the art project she was working on for school. For these precious hours, they weren't a family-facing loss. They were just the same people who had shared thousands of meals together, who knew each other's jokes and stories and dreams. But as the evening wore on, Kate's energy began to fade. She dozed off while Sarah was telling a story about her friend's cat, and William gently suggested the children head home to get some rest. They each kissed their mother goodnight, holding on a little longer than usual, sensing without being told that their time together was growing short. After the children left, William helped Kate get comfortable for the night. The hospital bed seemed to dwarf her now. She had lost so much weight that she looked fragile as a bird, but her spirit remained strong, and when she looked at him, he could still see the fierce intelligence and warmth that had first drawn him to her. "Will you stay tonight?" Kate asked, though she already knew the answer. William had not left her side for more than a few hours since her admission to the hospital. He had brought a sleeping bag, and had been making do with the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, refusing the nurse's suggestions that he go home to rest properly. "Wild horses couldn't drag me away," William replied, using the phrase that had become their private joke over the years. It had started when Kate was in labor with Emma, And William had promised he wouldn't leave her side. Even when she was screaming at him to get out, to give her space, he had stayed, holding her hand through every contraction. Kate smiled at the familiar words. "Do you remember when you painted that series of wild horses? You were so frustrated because you couldn't capture their movement the way you wanted to." William did remember. It had been about 10 years ago, during a particularly difficult period in his career, when his work wasn't selling well. He had become obsessed with painting wild horses, trying to show their freedom and power on canvas. Kate had sat with him through dozens of failed attempts, never once suggesting he give up or try painting something else. "You finally figured it out," Kate continued, her voice growing drowsy. "You realized you were trying too hard to control them on the canvas. The beauty was in letting them be wild, even in a painting." It was a lesson that had applied to more than just his art, William realized. Kate had taught him to let life be wild and messy and unpredictable, to find beauty in the chaos rather than trying to control every outcome. Their marriage had succeeded partly because they had learned to give each other space to be themselves, to pursue their own dreams while building something together. As Kate drifted off to sleep, William sat in the darkness thinking about all the nights they had shared. The early years when they couldn't afford heat and had slept under every blanket they owned, wrapped around each other for warmth. The nights when the children were babies and they took turns getting up for feedings, sometimes so exhausted they could barely function. The peaceful nights of recent years, when they would read beside each other in comfortable silence, occasionally reaching over to share an interesting passage or funny quote. He thought about the night Kate had told him she was pregnant with Emma. They had been trying for months, and when the test finally showed positive, Kate had been too excited to wait until morning to tell him. She had woken him up at 2 a.m, shaking him gently and whispering the news. They had sat up the rest of the night making plans and dreaming about their future child. And the night she had told him about her diagnosis, how different that conversation had been. Kate had been calm and practical, immediately starting to discuss treatment options and how they would tell the children. William had been the one falling apart, unable to process the words the doctor had said. Kate had held him while he cried, comforting him even though she was the one facing an uncertain future. Around midnight, Kate stirred and opened her eyes. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly, noticing that William was still wide awake in his chair. "Just thinking," William replied, "about all our nights together. I wish I had stayed awake more, appreciated them more instead of taking them for granted." Kate reached for his hand in the darkness. "We all think that when we're facing loss," she said. "But the truth is we did appreciate them. Maybe not every single night, but overall we knew we were lucky. We told each other we loved each other every day. We made time for each other even when life got busy. That's more than a lot of couples can say." She was right, as she usually was. They had been intentional about their love, working to maintain their connection even through the challenges of raising children and building careers. They had weekly date nights, even if it was just a walk around the neighborhood after the kids were in bed. They still held hands at movies, still kissed each other goodbye every morning. "I have something for you," Kate said suddenly, reaching into the drawer of her bedside table. She pulled out a small wrapped package about the size of a book. "I've been working on this for weeks before we knew. I finished it yesterday." William carefully unwrapped the package and found a leather-bound journal. Inside, Kate had written and illustrated the story of their relationship, from their first meeting to their children's births, to their proudest moments together. Each page was a small work of art, combining her elegant handwriting with delicate watercolor illustrations. The first page showed the coffee shop where they met, with 2 young people looking at each other across a crowded room. The last page showed their family gathered around their dinner table, heads bent together in laughter. Between these bookends, Kate had chronicled their entire love story with the eye of an artist and the heart of a devoted wife. "When did you find time to do this?" William asked, his voice thick with emotion. The journal represented hours and hours of work, and Kate had completed it while dealing with fatigue and pain from her illness. "Late at night, early mornings whenever you were sleeping or out of the room," Kate explained. "I wanted you to have something that showed our story the way I see it. Not just the big moments, but all the small ones too. The way you bring me coffee in bed every Sunday morning. How you always let me have the last bite of dessert. The face you make when you're concentrating on a painting." William turned through the pages slowly, amazed by the detail Kate had captured. She had drawn him painting at his easel, tongue slightly stuck out in concentration. She had captured Emma taking her first steps toward William's outstretched arms. There was Michael at his high school graduation, tall and proud in his cap and gown. Sarah blowing out candles on her 10th birthday cake, face glowing with excitement. But it was the smaller moments that took William's breath away. Kate had drawn herself and William slow dancing in their kitchen to music from an old radio. Sarah as a toddler, helping to paint the living room walls. Emma reading to her younger siblings on the couch. These were the moments that made up the texture of their life together. The ordinary magic that Kate had always been so good at recognizing. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," William said, closing the journal carefully. "I'll treasure it always." Kate smiled, looking more at peace than she had in days. "Good," she said, "because that's our real legacy, William. Not the paintings you'll sell or the children I taught. It's the love we've built together, the family we've created, the way we've chosen to see beauty in ordinary moments." The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching William's heavy heart. Kate had slept fitfully through the night and her breathing had become more labored. Dr. Martinez arrived early for her rounds and spoke quietly with William outside Kate's room. "I think it's time to call the children," the doctor said gently. "Kate is comfortable, but her body is beginning to shut down. It could be today or it could be tomorrow, but I don't think we're looking at much more time than that." William nodded, though the words felt like physical blows. He had known this moment was coming, but he still wasn't prepared for the reality of it. He stepped into the hallway to make the calls, his hands shaking as he dialed Emma's number first. "Dad?" Emma's voice was sharp with worry. She could tell from his tone that something had changed. "You need to come now, sweetheart," William said simply. "Bring Michael and Sarah, it's time." Emma's sob was audible through the phone. "We'll be there in an hour," she managed to say before hanging up. When William returned to Kate's room, she was awake and looking out the window at the cloudy sky. "Did you call them?" she asked without turning around. "They're on their way," William confirmed, settling back into his chair beside her bed. Kate nodded slowly. "Good. I don't want to go without saying goodbye properly." She turned to face him, and William was struck by how much she still looked like the young woman he had married, despite everything. Her eyes still held that spark of intelligence and humor that had captivated him from the beginning. "Are you scared?" William asked gently. Kate considered the question seriously before answering. "Not scared of dying, exactly," she said. "I'm scared of leaving you all behind. I'm scared of missing out on the rest of your lives. Emma's career, Michael's college years, Sarah growing up. I'm scared you'll all forget the sound of my laugh or the way I used to burn pancakes every Sunday morning." William reached for her hand. "We could never forget," he said firmly. "You're woven into every part of who we are. Emma has your strength and your compassion. Michael has your curiosity and your way of seeing the best in people. Sarah has your artistic eye and your infectious giggle. And me? Well, I wouldn't exist as the person I am today without you." Kate squeezed his hand weakly. "Promise me you'll help them remember the good things. Not just that I was sick at the end, but how I lived. Tell them about the time I tried to surprise you with homemade pasta and ended up with flour in my hair and sauce on the ceiling. Remind Emma about our spa days with face masks made from avocado. Tell Michael about how proud I was when he built that volcano for his science project. Make sure Sarah knows how much I loved watching her paint, even when she got more color on herself than on the paper." "I promise," William said, filing away every word. These memories would become precious to him in the months and years ahead, stories he would tell and retell to keep Kate's spirit alive in their family. The children arrived together, faces red from crying. Emma immediately went to Kate's bedside and took her mother's other hand. Michael stood at the foot of the bed, trying to be strong but clearly struggling. Sarah climbed onto the bed and curled up carefully beside her mother, just as she had done as a small child when she was frightened or sad. "My beautiful babies," Kate whispered, looking at each of them in turn. "I need you to know how proud I am of all of you. You've already become such wonderful people, and I know you're going to do amazing things with your lives." She turned to Emma first. You're going to be an incredible teacher just like you've always dreamed. You have such a gift for making people feel valued and understood. Don't let anyone convince you that teaching isn't important enough or prestigious enough. You'll touch hundreds of lives just like I did." Emma nodded through her tears, unable to speak. Kate looked at Michael next. "You're going to change the world, I know it. Whether it's through engineering or medicine or something we haven't even thought of yet. You have such a brilliant mind, but more importantly, you have a kind heart. Use both of them." Michael stepped closer to the bed, tears streaming down his face. "I love you, Mom," he managed to whisper. "I love you too, sweetheart," Kate replied. "So very much." Finally, she focused on Sarah, stroking her youngest daughter's hair gently. "You're going to create beautiful things, baby girl. Art and music and maybe stories too. But remember that the most beautiful thing you can create is a life filled with love and kindness. Be brave, be curious, be yourself." Sarah buried her face against Kate's shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. Kate held her as tightly as her weakened arms would allow, humming the lullaby she had sung to all three children when they were babies. The family spent the next few hours sharing memories and telling stories. They talked about family vacations, holiday traditions, and silly moments that had made them laugh over the years. Kate listened with a peaceful smile, occasionally adding her own perspective or reminding them of details they had forgotten. As the afternoon wore on, Kate's energy began to fade more noticeably. Her voice became quieter, and she dozed off frequently between conversations. The children took turns sitting beside her, holding her hand and talking to her softly. Around dinner time, Kate asked to speak with William alone. The children reluctantly stepped out into the hallway, giving their parents some privacy. "This is the hardest part," Kate said when they were alone, "saying goodbye to you. The children will be okay eventually. They have each other and they have you. But you've been my partner, my best friend, my everything for 25 years. How do you say goodbye to half of your soul?" William felt his carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know how to live without you. You've been my compass, my inspiration, my reason for everything. How do I paint sunsets without thinking of you? How do I make decisions without your wisdom? How do I even remember to eat regular meals without you taking care of me?" Kate managed a weak laugh. "You'll figure it out," she said. "You're stronger than you think you are, and I'll still be with you, just in a different way. Every time you paint something beautiful, I'll be there. Every time you help one of our children through a difficult moment, I'll be there. Every time you choose love over fear, kindness over anger, I'll be there." She paused, looking into his eyes with an intensity that reminded him of their wedding day, when they had promised to love each other for better or worse, in sickness and health. "But I need you to promise me something important. I need you to keep living, not just surviving. Paint new pictures, make new friends. Maybe even love someone new when you're ready. I know that sounds impossible right now, but someday it might not be. And I want you to know that it's okay. Love isn't finite. The love we've shared doesn't diminish just because you find room in your heart for someone else." William shook his head firmly. "I can't imagine loving anyone else," he said. "You're it for me, Kate. You always have been." Kate smiled sadly. "I know it feels that way now. But you're only 53 years old, William. You could have 20 or 30 more years ahead of you. I don't want you to spend them alone, honoring my memory by refusing to live fully. The greatest tribute you could give me is to continue being the man I fell in love with, someone who sees beauty everywhere, who loves deeply, who makes the world brighter just by being in it." They held each other as tightly as Kate's condition would allow, memorizing the feeling of being together one last time. William breathed in the scent of her hair, listened to the rhythm of her heartbeat, felt the familiar comfort of her hand in his. These physical sensations that he had taken for granted for 25 years would soon be only memories. "Tell me about the painting you're going to make of this moment," Kate whispered against his chest. William closed his eyes and tried to see it through an artist's lens. "Soft light coming through the window," he said slowly. "Two figures holding each other, but not sad exactly. Peaceful, grateful. There would be symbols of our life together in the background, subtle things. A wedding ring catching the light. A child's drawing taped to the wall. Flowers from friends, things that show a life well lived, well loved. That sounds beautiful, Kate murmured. Paint it exactly like that. And when people see it, they'll understand what real love looks like. The children returned as evening approached, along with several close friends and neighbors who had come to say their final goodbyes. Kate's hospital room became filled with quiet conversations, gentle laughter, and the kind of love that transforms even the saddest moments into something sacred. Mrs. Henderson brought a photo album filled with pictures of Kate, helping with various neighborhood events over the years. Tom from the coffee shop shared stories about the young couple who used to sit in his corner booth for hours, so obviously in love that other customers would smile just watching them. Maria, Kate's former colleague, talked about how Kate had mentored her as a new teacher, sharing lesson plans and offering encouragement during difficult days. Each visitor added another layer to the portrait of Kate's life, showing William and the children how deeply she had touched their community. She had been more than a wife and mother. She had been a force for good in the world, someone who made everyone around her feel more valued and capable. As the visitors gradually departed, promising to keep the family in their thoughts and prayers, Kate asked for her sketchbook one more time. Her hands were too weak now to draw alone, so William helped her guide the pencil as she created one final picture. Their family gathered around her bed, faces filled with love rather than sorrow. For the journal, she explained with a tired smile, so the story has a proper ending. Night fell slowly and the hospital grew quiet around them. Kate's breathing had become more shallow and irregular, and William could see that she was fighting to stay conscious for their sake. Dr. Martinez checked on her one more time and spoke quietly with the family about what to expect in the coming hours. Emma, Michael, and Sarah arranged themselves around Kate's bed, each holding one of her hands or touching her arm, maintaining physical contact that conveyed all the love they couldn't put into words. William sat closest to her head, stroking her hair the way she had always loved. "Don't be afraid to let go," William whispered to her during a moment when the children were distracted. "We'll be okay. Not the same, never the same, but okay. You've given us everything we need to take care of each other." Kate's eyes fluttered open one more time, and she looked at each member of her family in turn. "My loves," she breathed so quietly they had to lean in to hear her. "Thank you for the most beautiful life I could have imagined." Those were her last coherent words, though she remained peacefully present with them for several more hours. As midnight approached, her breathing became even more labored, with longer pauses between each breath. The family held vigil, taking turns talking to her softly, sharing favorite memories and expressing their love. William found himself thinking about the very beginning of their story, that first day in the coffee shop when Kate had spilled coffee on his sketchbook. She had been so apologetic, so determined to make it right, that he had been charmed before she even told him her name. Who could have known that one clumsy moment would lead to 25 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and a love story that had inspired everyone who witnessed it? Around 2 a.m, Kate's breathing became very irregular. Emma was holding her mother's right hand. Michael had his hand on her shoulder, and Sarah was curled up beside her just as she had been as a little girl. William was stroking her hair and whispering words of love and encouragement. "It's okay, my darling," he said softly. "You can rest now. We'll take care of each other, just like you taught us. Go in peace, knowing that you've been loved completely and that you've loved us completely in return." Kate's breathing grew quieter and quieter, with longer spaces between each breath. The family held their own breath during each pause, wondering if it would be the last. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to appear outside the hospital window, Kate took one final peaceful breath and was still. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the quiet sounds of their grief. But even in their sorrow, William felt a strange sense of completeness. Kate had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than she found it. Her death was heartbreaking, but her life had been triumphant. Dr. Martinez came in to confirm what they already knew, speaking with the gentle professionalism that had characterized all of Kate's care. The family was given time to say their final goodbyes in private, each taking a moment to kiss Kate's forehead and whisper their last words to her. When it was William's turn to be alone with her, he took her hand one final time and made a promise. "I'll paint our story," he whispered. "Every beautiful moment, every ordinary Tuesday, every sunset we watch together, I'll make sure the world knows what an extraordinary woman you were, and how lucky I was to love you." 3 months later, William stood in the center of the Riverside Gallery, surrounded by the most important work of his artistic career. The exhibition, titled A Love Story in Paint, had drawn visitors from across the country, all coming to witness what critics were calling a masterpiece of emotional storytelling through visual art. The paintings chronicled his life with Kate from beginning to end, but they weren't sad or morbid. Instead, they celebrated the joy, the ordinary magic, and the deep connection that had defined their 25 years together. The first painting showed a young woman with coffee-stained fingers apologizing to a charmed young man in a crowded cafe. The last showed a family gathered around a hospital bed, faces glowing with love rather than grief. Emma stood beside him, looking radiant in the dress Kate had helped her pick out for job interviews. She had just been hired as a third-grade teacher at the elementary school where Kate had once taught. "Mom would have loved this," Emma said, gesturing to the crowd of people moving slowly through the gallery, many of them wiping away tears as they took in the visual story of her parents' love. Michael had driven down from college for the opening, bringing several of his friends who had grown up knowing Kate as the neighborhood mom, who always had fresh cookies and patient answers to homework questions. At 19, he was studying engineering just as Kate had predicted, but he had also started taking art classes, inspired by watching his father work through grief by creating something beautiful. Sarah, now 15, had contributed her own artwork to the exhibition. Kate's former art teacher had encouraged her to create a series of small paintings, showing her memories of her mother. Kate teaching her to braid friendship bracelets. Kate laughing as they attempted to bake bread from scratch. Kate reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character. The paintings were displayed in a special corner of the gallery, and visitors often commented on how clearly they could see Kate's artistic influence in her daughter's work. The centerpiece of the exhibition was the painting William had envisioned during Kate's final days. The quiet hospital room filled with soft light, two figures holding each other with an expression of deep peace and gratitude. He had titled it Silent Goodbye, and it had become the image that people most associated with the entire collection. But perhaps the most powerful piece was also the simplest. A portrait of Kate reading by their kitchen window, afternoon light streaming across her face as she graded papers. William had painted it from memory, and somehow he had captured not just her physical likeness but her essence, the quality of attention and care that she brought to everything she did. Tom from the coffee shop had come to the opening, looking distinguished in his one-good suit. He stood for a long time in front of the painting of young William and Kate meeting for the first time. "I remember that day," he told William. "I was wiping down tables and I saw this young woman spill coffee everywhere, and then I saw the way that young man looked at her when she started apologizing. I thought to myself, that boy's a goner." I was right, Dr. Martinez had also come, along with several of the nurses who had cared for Kate. They were drawn to the paintings that showed Kate's final weeks, particularly one that depicted her working on the illustrated journal she had created for William. "She was so focused on that project," one of the nurses remembered. "Even when she was exhausted, she would ask us to prop up her pillows so she could work on it. We didn't know what it was, but we could see how important it was to her." The most touching moment of the evening came when Maria arrived with a group of Kate's former students, now adults with children of their own. They had organized themselves to attend the opening together, wanting to honor the teacher who had shaped their young lives. Several of them had brought their own children, excited to show them pictures of the woman they had heard so much about. One young woman approached William with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Kate taught me in 2nd grade," she said. "I was going through my parents' divorce and I was acting out in class because I didn't know how to handle my feelings. Instead of punishing me, she started letting me help her during lunch breaks, organizing supplies and decorating bulletin boards. She made me feel important and needed when everything else in my life felt chaotic." Another former student, now a father of 3, told William how Kate had encouraged his interest in writing when other teachers had dismissed his creative stories as too imaginative. "She told me that imagination was a superpower," he said. "I'm a published author now, and I think about that conversation every time I sit down to write." As the evening progressed, William found himself overwhelmed by the number of people whose lives Kate had touched. He had known she was beloved in their community, But seeing the evidence of her impact gathered in one place was almost overwhelming. Teachers, former students, neighbors, fellow volunteers from various charities, all had come to celebrate not just his art, but the woman who had inspired it. The gallery owner, a sophisticated woman named Patricia, who had initially been drawn to William's technical skill, found herself moved to tears by the story the paintings told. "I've been in this business for 20 years, she told William. "I've seen technical mastery and creative innovation, but I've rarely seen such pure emotional truth captured on canvas. These paintings don't just show us what Kate looked like, they show us who she was." Near the end of the evening, William stepped outside for some fresh air and found himself looking up at the stars. He thought about Kate's belief that love didn't end with death, that the bonds they had formed would continue in new ways. Standing there, surrounded by evidence of the impact their love story had on others, he could almost feel her presence. Emma joined him outside, slipping her arm through his in a gesture that reminded him powerfully of her mother. "I know this is hard," she said softly. Being here, celebrating her, but also feeling her absence so strongly. William nodded. "It is hard," he admitted. "But it's also healing. Seeing how many people she touched, how their lives are better because they knew her, it makes me understand that her death isn't the end of her story. Her influence is still rippling outward." "She would have been so proud of you tonight," Emma said. "Not just because of the paintings, but because of how you've honored her memory. You've turned your grief into something beautiful that helps other people understand what real love looks like." Over the following weeks, the exhibition continued to draw visitors. William often stopped by to watch people's reactions to the paintings, amazed by how many couples would stand hand in front of the pieces, clearly seeing their own relationships reflected in the visual story of his marriage to Kate. A young couple, clearly newly engaged based on the woman's sparkling ring, spent an hour studying the progression of paintings that showed William and Kate's relationship deepening over time. William overheard the woman say to her fiancé, "This is what I want us to be like in 25 years. Still holding hands, still finding joy in ordinary moments." An elderly man who had recently lost his own wife of 50 years returned to the gallery 3 times, each visit bringing him closer to acceptance of his loss. On his final visit, he approached William directly. "Thank you," he said simply. "Your paintings have helped me remember that grief is just love with nowhere to go. But looking at these, I see that love can go somewhere after all. It can inspire art, it can touch strangers. It can make the world a little more beautiful." The exhibition ran for 6 months, and by the time it closed, it had become the most visited show in the gallery's history. Art critics wrote about William's technical evolution. But more importantly, local newspapers ran stories about the love story that had inspired the work. Kate's influence extended even further as people shared the story online, creating a viral moment that spread their message of cherishing ordinary love to millions of people worldwide. 2 years after Kate's death, William received a letter that moved him to tears. It was from a young man in another state who had seen the online coverage of the exhibition. He wrote that he had been planning to end his engagement to his longtime girlfriend because he was worried their relationship wasn't exciting enough, wasn't dramatic enough to sustain a lifetime together. "But then I saw your paintings," the young man wrote, "and I realized that the most beautiful love stories aren't about passion and drama. They're about choosing each other every single day, finding magic in ordinary moments, building something together that's stronger than either person could create alone." I called off the breakup and proposed instead. "We're getting married next month, and we're hanging a print of your hospital room painting in our bedroom to remind us what real love looks like." William smiled as he read the letter, hearing Kate's voice in his head saying, "See, love keeps rippling outward." He had kept his promise to her, painting their story and sharing it with the world. In doing so, he had discovered that grief transformed into art could become a gift that helped others understand the preciousness of their own relationships. He still missed Kate every single day, but he no longer felt like half of himself was missing. Instead, he felt like he was carrying her love forward, using his art to remind the world that ordinary love between ordinary people could be the most